Well, good evening. I'm Mayor Pro Tem Elaine Genoway, and on behalf of the Laguna Niguel City Council, I welcome you to tonight's Human Trafficking Town Hall. So right now I would like to invite our mayor, Fred Minigar, up to begin as we do all things at city events with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mayor Fred Minigar.
Would you all please join me in honoring the flag of our great nation and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. You may be seated.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Minigar. So tonight, we have a lot of information to talk about, and some people have made it a priority to be here tonight. We have a number of distinguished guests who have made it a priority to share this evening with us, so I'd like to introduce them to you. Our Assemblywoman, Lori Davies. District Attorney Todd Spitzer. The Honorable Ann Figueroa, Mayor Pro Tem of Rancho Santa Margarita. Candace Burrows, representing Senator Pat Bates. Capistrano Unified School District Superintendent Kirsten Vital-Brulte. Capistrano Unified School District Associate Superintendent Greg Merwin. And from the City of Laguna Niguel, you've met Mayor Fred Minigar, and we also have council members Kelly Jennings, Sandy Raines, and Rishi Paul Sharma. And we have with us also City Manager Tammy Letourneau. You know, I'm looking at all of the guests sitting here, and I'm really amazed, I'm thrilled, my heart is warmed by the number of you that have taken tonight seriously and that you are engaged in your community, and your care and commitment to the community shows by your presence here. We enjoy an excellent quality of life here in Laguna Niguel, and as one of your city council members, I would much rather be talking to you about this beautiful new community center that we're in, the programs at our senior center, the programs at our aquatic center that are taking place on the floor below us, or the programs for our children and teens, or our upcoming holiday parade. But there is an issue that we must talk about, because if we don't acknowledge that human trafficking is occurring, it will continue to flourish. If we don't acknowledge that human trafficking is occurring, we can't take action to prevent it or to assist the victims. There is no shame in being a victim. There is shame on us if we don't act to prevent it and to help the victims out of the life to become survivors. Human trafficking is modern-day slavery. Orange County is both a destination due to our affluence and as a corridor between Los Angeles and San Diego. Tonight's speakers are members of the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force and the Capistrano Unified School District school counselors. They will define human trafficking, tell us what happens to the victims and their perpetrators, address what can be done to prevent it from happening in the first place, and present how we can work together to help the victims become survivors. Tonight we are looking at human trafficking from the perspective of Orange County. What is happening in our local community? There are many images of human trafficking that you see on the news, and that's a much broader subject. But we're here tonight to talk about our community and what we can do. The speakers have a lot of information to share, so they'll not be taking questions during the presentations because that question may be answered as they continue to speak. We will have a Q&A at the end of the presentations for anything that has not been answered. In your program, you each have a yellow card. So if you have a question, please write it on the yellow card, and when we get to that portion of the program, the Laguna Niguel Women's Club volunteers will go around and collect the cards if you have a question. You each have a program that lists tonight's speakers. The reverse of the program provides contact information for these resources. The inside of the program is for your own note-taking. As you listen to tonight's speakers, think about what is your call to action. What are you personally going to do to prevent the vulnerable from being targeted and help the victims become survivors? Our speakers are about to share a lot of information with you. So I'll give you 2 Orange County stats from the Orange County Victims Report that indicate why it is so important that you listen very carefully to our speakers. First, 71% of the victims were recruited by someone they know, with 40% stating that the recruiter was someone they thought was their boyfriend. 2, in Orange County, 13 new victims are identified each month. Our first speaker tonight is one that you have met before here in Laguna Niguel. Her story continues to inspire and continues to engage all of us into the actions that we can take to prevent this from happening. Ori Freeman is our speaker tonight. She has asked that no video, audio, or photographic recordings be taken. So please respect that. Ori is an advocate who transforms the lives of youth involved in the juvenile justice and child welfare systems by sharing what she has learned from her own experience. Over 20,000 individuals have felt her strength through the interactive training she conducts for law enforcement officers and professionals from child-serving sectors. Importantly, she has also focused her energy on working directly with exploited and at-risk youth through Survivor to Leader. Please welcome Ori Freeman.
I was once a victim of child sex trafficking from the ages of 11 to 15. And then I became a survivor. And then a leader.
You gotta learn like healthy boundaries as well. Like somebody that cares about you, love you.
Get a job, take them to school, do what you need to do.
And I knew what it felt to lead. And to be a voice. And to bring hope.
Cool. It's a nice little snippet of my soon-to-be documentary that's getting ready to come out soon. You know, I'm really thankful to be here tonight, and I thank you all for coming out, especially at this time. I honestly was driving up here, and I'm really hot. When I say hot, I'm really humble, open, and transparent about things. And I said, what can I really tell these people, thinking about how everything is playing out in social media and over the internet. And I kind of really just want to be really, really open with you. You know, I want you all to think about tonight what your normal is and when you leave here tonight and what that's going to look like. What you're going to do with your children, what you might do with your grandchildren, what you do in your family, what your complete day looks like. And I can briefly tell you what my normal looks like with my little 2-year-old daughter. You know, going to work, going to college, picking her up, daycare, hoping that she can stay all the way till 6 o'clock, cooking a nice meal, and I tuck my daughter in at night. No worries. Not thinking about surviving or anything. But tonight, as our clock gets later and later, there are going to be young boys and young girls that are going to be exploited tonight. And I was 11 and 15 years old on the streets of Orange County. And I wasn't just raped once. God bless anyone who'd experienced that. But I know what it's like to be sexually assaulted 4,000 times within a year. And that's what's going to happen tonight. There are going to be children that are going to be bought, sold, and raped tonight. Even right here in our backyard. Now it might look completely different. My story might look completely different. But what I will tell you is I have served over 120 high schools. I've served them within LA County and within Orange County. And the number one highest rate that I have gotten is when I'm down in South County of Orange County, and I've had over 20 kids in each class per session that have come to me and talk about the sexual abuse that they are experiencing at home. And that happens in South County. And I'm going to tell you why that's important, because all those stories start off a lot the same. Someone that they knew has been sexually abusing them in the home. And then, hey, now you have social media. You have Instagram. You have TikTok. And now they're expressing themselves over the internet. Or now they're starting to have conversations, and they're being able to vent to other people that they don't even know over the internet. I've seen this over and time again. I have literally about 15 girls that I made contact with this week through an organization that I work closely with. And all 15 of those young girls, all different ethnicities, all from the ages of 11 to just 15, had contacted somebody over the internet. And I only share that brief stuff because Happy and Nicole are going to go more into extensive details for you guys. But it just looked completely different. My life didn't look like, when I walked into this room, I bet you no one would probably think, if it wasn't like all on the table or, in the program, you wouldn't think that I was ever a trafficking victim. It hides in plain sight. It's an invisible crime. But what I will tell you is that you have to think about your normal every single day and what you do. And know that tonight, someone's going to be abused, and someone's going to be sold, and someone's going to be sexually assaulted over and over. My normal from 11 to 15 wasn't thinking about school. It wasn't thinking about prom. It wasn't thinking about graduation. I wasn't thinking about being tucked in at night by my mom. My daughter doesn't have a worry in the world right now. She's not thinking about surviving. From 11 to 15, every single night, I was thinking about surviving. Every single night being beat and being sexually assaulted. Thinking about surviving. We don't have to think about that. You don't have to think about when you walk out of here, you're going to live the next day. And that's what life looks like for them. That's what life looked like for me. But I want to tell you, the most important thing about my life is at some point somebody decided to step in. Somebody decided to say something. Somebody decided to do something in my life. I have some amazing people in my corner, and I share this because, Elaine talked about how it's really important to help victims become survivors. Because I know that even though my impact may be gradual, right, and I come in contact probably with some of your children or some of your grandchildren to these high schools, and the impact that I can give, because I can not only share my story, but talk about the hope and talk about the journey and talk about that it does get better and what to do and what to avoid and things like that. But that only happens is because I had the support of not only organizations, but individuals that didn't just see me as a victim and didn't just have empathy for me or felt pity for me, but see me as a human being and see me as a child. Many of you probably have daughters in this room. Many of you probably have granddaughters and sons and grandsons in this room. And it just happens everywhere, all throughout the day, no matter what community it is. And I remember, I was 11 years old, and my first memory, for the first time, I'm taking my daughter this year to Disneyland. My first memory of Disneyland is in a hotel being sexually abused and being sold at 11 years old. That's my first memory. And luckily, by the grace of God, I have a beautiful support system. But I wouldn't have that if someone didn't see that there was something that was wrong, that something was happening to me. I can tell you as many times that I've walked up and down the streets of Orange County and was sold in and out of hotels and walked into McDonald's or to a Denny's restaurant with hardly anything on, and mothers didn't say anything, didn't do anything. Instead, people turned their noses up, and we think that it's not our problem. And I've learned from a really old friend of mine that, I don't blame anyone, but I wish that somebody would have said something or just did something about it and be proactive and do anything. I can guarantee you many of your children, a lot of your grandchildren, their schools are not going to talk about this. I've done it. I've seen it. I've been a part of the process where they don't even want to talk about the subject because it's too explicit. And this is their reality that they're living in. If I gave you the statistics now of the children that I've worked with over the past 8 years, and I can tell you every ethnicity, I can give you every age, a lot of it is transpiring. It's over social media. And you know where it starts? It starts in a home. It starts with the vulnerability. And it's not just about abuse. It's not growing up in some poor community. It's not growing up with great parents and affluential parents who might have great careers and have an education behind them. It starts with the vulnerabilities of self-esteem. It starts on how they view themselves, on how the world is telling them how to view themselves. I sat across yesterday in a Denny's in Corona Del Mar with a 16-year-old girl who for the first time started talking about her vulnerability about just by the way that she looked and how she had been talking to this guy over the internet and that he tells her that she's beautiful and he tells her that she's worthy and all these different things and she don't even know this man. And it starts off little minor. He pulls up to the school and things like that. And the one thing that she needed to hear was not the red flags, was not just my story, but just the reality of stuff. Of where she gets her values. I asked about her parents, and she said, no, both of my parents are educated. They have great jobs, but it's still not enough for them. I have a 2-year-old daughter. I know at some point what I give might not be enough. But by the grace of God, I know that I have a support system that definitely surrounds her with that. You know, when I look at my family picture, I have a family photo in my living room. And you would think it's this, black family, Baptist, just all out. And I look at that photo and it's every single race of the people that I've came in contact with. Every single person. Whether that was law enforcement, whether that was someone that was in the community, whether that was a teacher, whether that was somebody that I met at a group home, whether if it was somebody that I met at a school, or whether if I met somebody at a town hall meeting. That became a part of my life. And a lot of times, a lot of these victims don't have that. And I can give you also the unsuccessful rate and the number one cause of why many young girls and why young boys go back to life is because they don't have nobody. As much as we say we accept our kids, do we really accept the fact of certain things that they might encounter and what they might go through in their life? Can we really accept it and can we really move forward? And that doesn't just look like putting someone out or things like that, but do we really accept the things that they experience and do we really know how to do that? I hope that tonight you take a call to action in whatever way. There are many amazing organizations that work with youth. And I'm not telling you to go save the world. I'm not telling you to go and try to find a trafficking victim and ask them, do you need help? That's not what I'm saying. But each and every one of you can play a part in somebody's. I don't really believe in rescuing, but I do believe in restoration and recovery. I do believe in that. And then all it takes is one person. I had one person that changed my life, which was a man who I would never expect. Which brings me to my next topic. And after that one person that came in my life, I trusted anybody else that he brought into my life. And I think the most important thing about my story is not the sad stuff that I've been through. I can sit here and tell you guys a whole bunch of gory details and the things that I experienced and what life looks like in the life for 4.5 years from 11 to 15 and what every single night looks like surviving and the abuse that you experience. The most horrific thing is the mental bondage, thinking that no matter where you go, nobody accepts you and love you for who you are. I've been to churches, I walked in them with half nothing on, wasn't accepted. I've been in those places. I've been in organizations that didn't accept me for who I am. But the most beautiful part about the journey is that success is very small. To me, I define success as a survivor is that when you walk into church for the first time, knowing that you didn't know where God was for 4.5 years. That's success. Having faith. Being able to accept a hug from somebody because all that you've ever experienced in your life is being treated like the scum of the earth. And you've never been called your name, but you've been called all type of violent things. That's success. Being able to sit next to a cop and have, no offense, I love you, Abby. Being able to be invited somewhere for Christmas. Me. This girl where I come from and everything that I experienced, you're willing to have a meal with me. And you're willing to celebrate Christmas and involve your family with me. I have some amazing people that they weren't here to make it tonight, but they're from this area. And at 18 years old, they decided, and I'm telling you to do this, but at 18 years old, they decided to take this girl who had been trafficked, who had been vulnerable, who had experienced any type of abuse you can think of. And I ended up living with them for about 1.5 years. And for the first time, I knew what it was like to have a family. I didn't know that people have conversations over dinner. I didn't know you don't have your elbows on the table and things like that. But people play a part, in different ways. But success looks different. And I'll tell you that when you guys are in grocery stores and when you're in the store, You're not going to be able to tell what a victim looks like. You're not going to be able to spot them out like that. But what I will tell you, you've probably come across many of them. Many of your children, I can guarantee you probably know somebody who's been abused and who's being sexually abused, and they haven't said anything. And so the call to action tonight is just I ask that you would do something, whatever that is in your community. You know, whether that's getting involved with an organization, whether that's volunteering some type of way, whether if you don't have the time and you have to volunteer your finances and things like that in order to support somebody, it helps. You know, I'm 1 year in and I'm getting ready to graduate from college because of someone wanting to support me through that, because they believe in me. And I'll tell you this, I have a 5th grade education. 5th grade. Because that's the age that I was being trafficked at. And someone seen something in me and said, hey, I need to help her out because I know that she has it in her. I know that she can do that. I know that she can accomplish that. So as you all go home tonight and you tuck your children in or you make those phone calls, also just talk to somebody about it. Talk to the people in your life about it, because I guarantee you, I did it with my own father. I said, I think everybody knows about human trafficking. I know that everybody knows that people are being exploited. And I sat in a coffee shop and asked 102 people, I'll never forget. 12 of them could tell me what human trafficking was. And each and every one of them in Orange County said it can't happen here, it doesn't happen here. And the last thing I will say is that people are not driving from Los Angeles County or from San Diego to purchase sex. There needs to be a conversation, and there needs to be, whether you get involved with creating laws or being a part of a committee, or for all of the people here, I thank you, but what I will say is that people need to be held accountable for their actions. I had a phone call the other day with MasterCard, the CEO of MasterCard, that won't pull off of sites that children are being sold on. People need to be held accountable. People who are purchasing sex is right here in Orange County. Fathers, doctors, coaches, moms, doesn't matter. There's no specific label on it. People are purchasing sex. Men with children, women with children, they do that. So I thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free. I'll just say that if you have a specific question, do not be afraid if it's specifically towards me to ask me. I'm very open. And if I don't want to answer it, I won't. But I've never turned down a question. Thank you.
I don't know, if you're not moved by that, I don't know what will move you. And this is real life for Ori. And this is why we are shining a bright light on what is taking place, so that we have no more Oris. We work to that so that this doesn't happen. We need to take responsibility for that as a community. So our next speaker is Nicole Stratman. Nicole has a master's degree in social work from USC and has been with the County of Orange Social Services Agency since 1999. She is currently the CSEC coordinator for the Division of Children and Family Services and has worked with this population for over 7 years. In fact, Nicole was a speaker at our first town hall on this a couple of years ago. CSEC stands for Commercially Sexually Exploited Children. As the CSEC coordinator, she has been part of the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force to create an enhanced collaborative response model, treating trafficked children as victims and ensuring the child welfare system has the services to meet the victim's needs. Please welcome Nicole Stratman.
Thank you. It's good to be back here in Laguna Niguel. It was about 4 years ago when I was here last. A lot has happened in that amount of time, and I'm very glad to expand on what I talked about last time. It's very hard to follow Ori, but I'm going to do my best. I'm going to get into some statistics, a little bit of boring stuff, but it's really, really, really important to understand, what does human trafficking look like? What is it really? What is it here in Orange County? So I have this slide up because I want everyone to understand what we're talking about is domestic minor sex trafficking. That is what's going on here in the United States. It's not overseas, it's not the international, and I think it's really important to know that, because oftentimes what we see on social media or what we see posted on the news can blur those lines, and we can have a lot of misunderstanding of what we're really talking about. And so this is what we're talking about tonight. Commercially sexually exploited children specifically is what I will focus on, since I come from child welfare and that is my experience. in working with children who've been exploited and trafficked. So, first question I want to ask, and you don't have to participate necessarily because I have the answers on here, but I want you to think about it. As I pull up these slides, or as I pull up the terminology that's going to come up, I want you to think about the word prostitute or prostitution. And what do you automatically think of? What are some of the words that come to mind when you think of somebody who's referred to as a prostitute or engaging in prostitution? Many times when I've done this presentation, these are the types of words people will say. A drug addict, desperate for money, has no family. They're choosing to do this. This is something that they're wanting to engage in. And that they're a criminal. On the other hand, if we think about the word victim, what types of words come to our mind when we think of a victim? When we think of a victim, we're thinking about someone who needs help. Somebody who has no choice. Something has been put upon them. That they are vulnerable, hopeless, and someone hurt them. This is what other people have said when we think of those words. I really, really want us to understand what prostitution is, that by and large, the majority of the time, as you heard Ori speak about, they are victims. Victims of human trafficking, victims of commercial sexual exploitation. So I'm going to talk now who are the victims, as Ori had mentioned as well. Before getting into that, we are going to see a video. It's about a 5-minute video, and I want you to listen to the speaker and how she's talking about the vulnerabilities and that sort of trajectory, that continuum of becoming a victim who's trafficked.
You know, you're 12 years old and you're living with your moms, and your mom's is struggling because she didn't think that life was really going to work out like this for her, and she doesn't have a man around, and the men that are around haven't always been that great. Sexual abuse is becoming kind of normal for you, and you think that other people don't have secrets that are as bad as you, and maybe you've tried to talk to somebody at school and they haven't really heard you, or maybe they just haven't had time to listen to you. And so you're seeing these girls on the videos, and they're so pretty and they're so sexy, and so your way at 12 of escaping into this fantasy world is to think about what it must be like to be one of these girls, and you know that adult men already look at you, and you wonder how you can kind of use that.
I was just a child, and that's how I was supposed to live, like a child and like an adult.
So one day you're coming out of school and there's a guy outside in a Cadillac, and he's nice looking. I mean, he's got the baseball cap and the jeans and the Timbs, and he tells you how pretty you are, and you know how pretty your hair looks, and it's been a while since anybody even really noticed anything about you. And for the first time, you feel like somebody's really interested in you, because now all of a sudden he's asking you about your dreams and your hopes and where your father's at, and he says that he can be a daddy to you.
The people that I shouldn't have depended on, I was depending on for support.
And so that night he takes you to a club and he puts you up on the stage and he gives you a few drinks, and there's men throwing dollars at you, and it's scary, but all the time you're just looking at his face in the back of the room, and he's like, you know, go ahead baby girl, go ahead, you're doing it for daddy. And you're feeling proud because nobody's ever said that to you. And so then that night he tells you that there's more stuff that you've got to do, and he takes you into a room and there's a man there, and he tells you to strip, and you think this is something you'll never do, and yet there's a part of you that already knew how to do this, because that's what your stepfather's been doing to you all these years before. And so you turn that trick, and it's like a part of you has died inside. And so you come out of the club that night, and you get in the car, and you know he's pumping 50 Cent, and he takes you to McDonald's, and he tells you, you did a good job tonight, sweetie. And he's stuffing his pockets with the $1,000 that he made. And right now, you're happy.
The people that I shouldn't have depended on, I was depending on for support.
this is the best that it's ever going to get. And everything else in your life has prepared you for this moment. All the sexual abuse, or the neglect, or the drama, or the pain, or the trauma has prepared you for tonight, where you stepped across a line that you always thought you'd never really quite step across. And you don't realize that night what it'll be like to be on the track and get raped. And you don't realize that daddy isn't really going to protect you. You don't realize what it's like to have a gun held to your head that night. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you catch your first STD. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you first come home and daddy beats you for the first time because you didn't make enough money. You don't know what it's going to be like to have cops offer to trade sex with you in exchange for not being arrested. And then sometimes you'll do that and they'll still lock you up anyway. You don't know what it's like to sit up in jail and know that you just made $1,500 for your pimp last night, but he won't come down and put $200 bail on just to get you out a few days early. You don't know what it's like to walk down the street at 6 o'clock in the morning when you're just getting off work and people are starting their day and they see you and they know what you do and they look at you in a way that you just don't feel like you belong in that world anymore. And you don't know what it's like to feel like you've lost part of yourself along the way and to feel like you'll never leave. And no matter how many times you try to leave, he'll always find you and catch you. But that night, all you care about is the fact you're riding in a Cadillac and you're eating McDonald's and you're listening to 50 and you got this one man who you really think loves you sitting right by your side.
Okay, so that was a lot of what Ori said too, wasn't it? That vulnerabilities, that prior history of child abuse, that wanting to make somebody happy, finally someone is paying attention to her, and that they had the vulnerability, she had the vulnerability of prior sexual abuse, but we also know that our kids who are spending time online, you're gonna hear a lot of this tonight, because our kids in South County especially are spending a lot of time online, and they want to make other people happy. And they want to do what somebody else wants them to do. And it can end up in a situation like Rachel, that's Rachel Lloyd, also a survivor, was talking about. What we have seen in the statistics that we have gained since 2014, we've been keeping them, that 90% of the youth that we've made contact with who have been alleged to be exploited have had prior child abuse history. And like Ori said, child abuse is happening here too in South County. 100% of the youth that law enforcement has made contact with that we know is being trafficked have had prior child abuse history. We also know that the reason why we don't always see this and why it's so good that you are here tonight to be able to really learn and understand this is because they don't recognize that they're a victim. It is a hidden problem. As you can hear from Rachel, and even as Ori was talking about, that it's such a subtle coercion that happens over time that before they know it, they're in a very, very bad situation. And this is a really good continuum to show how vulnerabilities early on in life, which include prior child abuse, but doesn't always have to include that, you can end up in a situation where you're being commercially sexually exploited. If you feel like you have some low self-esteem, which Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok could certainly bring that out in a child, and your low self-esteem, and then somebody instant messages you, sends you a DM, and says, hey, I think you're beautiful. I'd like to spend some time with you. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the Child Abuse and Neglect Reporting Act, because this is really, really, really important too. Sexual exploitation, commercial sexual exploitation, human trafficking is a child abuse report. It's mandated if you work in a setting where you're a mandated reporter while you're working, but if you're not mandated and you have a concern, you can call the Child Abuse Hotline. There is an 888 number for the National Human Trafficking Hotline, but I'm telling you that the work we do here in Orange County, the law enforcement, the DAs that we have here, the type of investigations that take place, the response that we have for children and adults is superior in Orange County. Call the Child Abuse Hotline and we will respond. So I want to kind of explain a little bit what sexual exploitation is and commercial sexual exploitation, just so you have an understanding, since you'll hear that. And this is where it starts, before trafficking occurs, is that taking a picture, a nude picture or some sort of picture like that, obscene picture, and sharing it with somebody. It's also called sextortion that happens online as well. We may hear a little bit more about that. So any type of sharing of any sort of obscene material like that is sexual exploitation. It is a child abuse report, it is a law enforcement report. Commercial sexual exploitation, this is where we see a lot of our kids fall into. They don't necessarily have somebody forcing them or coercing them into having sex acts for money. That's trafficking. What they have, though, is they have a need to survive in some way or another. Maybe they want to keep up with their friend at school who has the newest phone, who has the nicest car, who has the Gucci purse. And they want to keep up with them. So now they're willing to exchange a sex act or a photograph for money. That's the commercial part of it. Our kids are doing this all over Orange County. All over. These are by and large most of the phone calls that we are getting. And we call it survival sex because it's kind of a way to survive. Trafficking falls under that definition. I want to touch briefly on our child abuse services team. That is our child advocacy center here in Orange County. It is a forensic team of investigators and DA that conduct the investigations of physical abuse, severe physical abuse, and sexual abuse in Orange County. They all go to CAST. It's a multidisciplinary team. The reason why I want to bring this up is similar to what Ori said. It oftentimes starts as sexual abuse or physical abuse or some sort of abuse in the home first to put in that vulnerability. A really, really important piece of information and statistic is that 89% in 2020, 89% of the victims of child abuse in Orange County knew their perpetrator. And so what that does, it gives them a connection with somebody. And a trust is sort of built in there. And so it's really, really important. It's an unhealthy trust, but nonetheless it's there. But it's why it's really important to understand that and how vulnerable they can be. This slide, this is a newer one that I'm sharing, but I think it's really, really important to see. Over time since 2015, on the left-hand side, the darker orange, are the calls of children from Orange County. When we would get calls of children who reside in Orange County where we were told that they were being exploited, look in 2015 how we had more kids there in Orange County, but we still had a lot of kids outside of Orange County that we were finding here in Orange County. It's almost even in 2015. As time has gone on, as awareness has occurred, as learning has occurred, as community events like this have happened, as teachers and therapists have had trainings, our calls for children in Orange County have gone up, and the calls of kids from outside of Orange County have gone down. And that's really due to a lot of the education and work being done. We want to continue to see that because still people are not seeing it and realizing that they need to call. And then I have the other one down there about the reporting party type. And I think this one is also interesting because a lot in the beginning was from law enforcement. They are the ones that understood it, were going out, investigating, and locating and recovering victims. Over time, as the education awareness has become known, we have seen more and more of our mandated reporters calling in, but very few of non-mandated reporters, which is why, again, it's so important to understand this. You can call our child abuse hotline anonymously. We prefer to have the name because your information is always kept confidential. We can never, ever, ever release that information, but you can call anonymously as well. And we hope that this type of event will have you understand and recognize when something is sexual exploitation, commercial sexual exploitation, human trafficking, and call us so we can intervene. I'm going to touch again on this. You're going to hear this a lot tonight. Like I said, exploitation is happening online, on applications that maybe many of us have as well. Instagram is one of my favorites. I don't really understand Snapchat and TikTok, so stay away from those, but our young people know those really, really well. Really, really well. I have a youth that I'm working with that often uses Snapchat to reach out to people, and people reach out to her. It's her main method of communication with people who then ultimately end up exploiting her. So it's very, very dangerous to be online unless we teach our children how to be safe online. They have to understand that there are people that are going to reach out to them, just like we've talked about. And we teach our children about stranger danger when they go to the park or they're walking around maybe the neighborhood or something like that. As they get older and have a little bit more independence, be careful of strangers. And that is still true. Nothing has changed with that. It's not worse. There's not kidnapping like out of control going on. That's different than any other time. That's the same. Strangers are on the internet, are on their social media. Strangers are their likes, their followers, their subscribers, their friends. Those are the strangers they need to understand who are dangerous. Because it starts with a very subtle grooming process of that coercion and getting them to reveal more and more information about themselves. I think we're going to hear more about that tonight as well. But really, really important to understand those are where the strangers are. We need our children to understand how to be safe online. Because they're going to be online. We can't keep them away forever. They're going to be online. So my next slide is going to be the voices of trafficked youth. These are youth that our social workers have made contact with after law enforcement has located them and recovered them. These are the words that they have said upon recovery of their experiences out with their trafficker. This is what we don't want our kids to end up saying. So we really want to get to our kids before they're experiencing this. It's not much unlike what Ori was talking about. This happens all the time, all too frequently. This is the situation they end up in. We need to get to them before that. And so briefly, because I know I'm running out of time here, I'm going to try to talk fast. This could be a whole semester on complex trauma and trauma bonding. But what I want to really say about this is that the reason why we see youth and even young adults who continue to go back to very dangerous situations is oftentimes because of prior trauma when they were a child, over and over multiple forms of abuse is complex trauma, and then connection or a bond with their trafficker, their exploiter, their abuser, which oftentimes replicates perhaps exactly what they experienced as a child in their own home. So it's a very familiar feeling that happens. The brain chemistry changes as well whenever abuse is happening as a child. So how they respond to a dangerous situation as they get older is not the way you and I would respond to it, and often propels them to be back into that situation. Our former presiding judge of juvenile court, I really like how she summed up this and the kids that we see once they're in that trafficking situation. Again, we're trying to avoid that with our kids, but once they end up there, she says, their stories are of deprivation and alienation. They have been beaten and branded, sexually assaulted again and again, day after day, whose understanding of caring, support, and love is as twisted as the minds of the pimp who owns them. These stories result in children whose sense of survival demands that they view everyone with distrust, suspicion, and defensiveness. Supporting them means getting past the aggression and anger, not hearing or at minimum not being personally offended by the F-bombs, and to see the child for who she or he is, a child who has survived unimaginable trauma. So what do we do in Orange County? Because it gets to be very overwhelming. It can be very difficult when we have a child that's that far along. What can we do? We have a collaborative court in Orange County for our youth that are in the foster care system who've also been exploited and trafficked. We have an amazing presiding judge, currently Judge Modowiki, who sits right down at the table with the youth, talks to them about what's going on, helps them identify goals. Social workers, therapists, advocates are present to support that child, to make better decisions, to help them really identify what's happened to them. I always have to highlight our most favorite team member in our court. It's really, really special. We lost Baxter last year. He was an amazing therapy dog that we had. Really, really, really good for our youth. Luckily, we were able to continue. His handler, Cheryl, was able to continue on and got another dog, Cadence, who also is making really big differences with our kids in court to really help them process that trauma as well. And there's Cheryl and Cadence, our new therapy dog. So she's come in as a volunteer. She's been vetted up and down, left and right, years and years and years. She's amazing. There are things that you can do to really make a difference with kids that are that far along, already have been trafficked or exploited, or prevention. One of the most important things you can do is to be a safe, stable, trusted adult in a child's life. That is one of the most important things that you can do for a child. Your own child, your niece, your nephew, your neighbor. Understand what's going on for them. Be that safe person that they can come to, that they can let you know what's going on with them, so that they always know that you're safe for them. Also, our Grace Court, we put on events every month for our youth to give them new and different experiences, expose them to other kinds of jobs and goals in the future, whether it's technical schools or college or whatever it is. We really wrap these kids around with everything we can to give them the best opportunities for the future. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you to your team for what you do to help the victims and for being here tonight, because what we want to do is have those calls go up so the number of victims go down. So thank you very much. So our next speaker is Investigator Happy Medina. Happy is a member of law enforcement, so we please ask that there not be any photos, videos, or audio recordings of his presentation. And Happy is currently assigned as an investigator to the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force. He has 27 years of law enforcement experience, with the last 6.5 on the task force. Happy has been married for 36 years, has 4 daughters, 2 granddaughters, and 2 dogs, also female. Please welcome Happy.
Yes, I feel pretty comfortable up here amongst all you ladies. This is actually the only time I get to speak without being interrupted. That therapy dog, by the way, is actually pretty amazing, but it's kind of annoying to me. Every time it comes into the office, it comes straight to my office. It starts pawing at me, and at first I thought that was a good thing, and then all my partners told me, you apparently need more therapy than all of us because that dog won't leave your side. So let's see if I can get this to move on. I appreciate being here. My boss was out of town, so I got voluntold to speak in his place. You know how that is. I hope I hit the mark tonight, because I'm listening to everyone, and it's amazing because most of us speak together and do trainings across the state, and I kind of know what they're going to say. And tonight when I came, I prepared all day, actually. I hope it seems that way. And my concern was that I want to provide some education for you, because we really haven't completely defined what human trafficking is. And I think that is the biggest struggle I have when I get to train law enforcement. They really don't understand what it is. I've been a police officer for 27 years. For the first 21 years of my life, I had no idea what human trafficking was. I didn't know what pimping was. I didn't know what pandering was. Some of those laws had not existed. There was another law on the books that was a misdemeanor that I'd never even dealt with. It's supervision of a prostitute, which is the same as a felony pimping charge now. That aside, when I first came to the detail, I started to learn from some very excellent DAs who mentored me, and some of the folks up here. And it wasn't until then I started to understand what human trafficking was, and more importantly, what it wasn't. So I want to tell a couple stories with you, try to stay within my time here. I was out to dinner. My wife and I went out to dinner the other night with some friends of ours. We've known them for years, and his father just widowed. He's elderly, and he gets a call. Hi, this is so-and-so from Norton Virus. I need to talk to you about your computer. It's been compromised. It's full of malware, and we need to help you rectify the situation. It's very serious. All your data is compromised, and you can trust me. So I need you right now to walk up to your computer and to log into it, which he did. I need you to keep the phone by your side, put it on speaker, and I'm going to walk you through this, and I'm going to protect you from this harmful virus. So he does that. He opens up his computer, and he says, I need your password so I can log in remotely. And he gave it to him. And as this progressing, the gentleman on the other side of the phone began to lose his, his politeness, and proceeded to tell him, okay, now that I'm in your computer, I have access to all of your information. I know where you live. I know who your family is. And what I want you to do now is I want you to get into a car and I want you to drive to your bank. You're going to keep the speakerphone on the entire time when you get there. I want you to go into the bank and you're going to wire this amount to my account. I don't want you to deviate from this because, again, let me remind you, I have access to everything. I know who you are. I know who your grandchildren are. I know who your son is. I know where they live. He gets in the car and he drives to the bank. Fortunately for him, by the time he got there, and as my friend's telling the story, he's saying he's shaking the whole time with his phone. He goes into the bank and he takes a piece of paper out and he writes to the teller what's occurring. Passes it on to the teller, and the only reason he got out of that was the quick thinking of the teller, but he said, my phone's about to die. My phone's about to die. I have to, it's just going to die. And he said, do not hang up. Whatever you do, do not hang up the phone, or there will be severe consequences. Well, he hung up and nothing happened. He had to get some help and had to go and rejuvenate his computer and get it all set up again because his work was compromised, and he had to call every credit card company, and fortunately he was no longer victimized. I would call that exploitation. Anybody sitting here in this room, you're wondering what does that have to do with human trafficking? I'll tell you. You should be angry about that. Maybe some of you have had fathers or mothers or grandfathers or grandmothers who've experienced this, and if you were me, I would be livid. I would be upset because they've taken advantage of someone. The crime of human trafficking and the issues surrounding prostitution are a crime of exploitation. If you leave with anything I tell you tonight, I want you to understand and wrap your head around this word exploitation. Ori used it, and Nicole used it. So I want to use it. That is the definition. I've massaged it a little bit. I've added a little bit of my own phrasing to it. But basically, it's when you take unfair advantage of someone. You use their vulnerabilities to exploit them. And in the world of human trafficking and commercialized sex, what someone will do will take those vulnerabilities and use them for their own benefit and gain, their monetary gain. They'll take a little 11-year-old girl, and I want to pause here because this only works if you make it personal. This example will not go anywhere unless you do this, okay? I purposely in my bio put that I have 4 daughters and 2 granddaughters, okay? I want you to think of someone between the ages of 11 and 15. That's when Ori was trafficked. I want you to think of someone who recognizes the vulnerabilities of maybe just their innocence and their youth. And they start to converse with them on Instagram or Snapchat, and they say, I'm your friend. And they tell every little girl, because predominantly the victims I'm talking about are 99% females. And they start to have this conversation with this person you know, and they begin to tell them everything a little girl wants to hear. You're beautiful. You're sexy. You're pretty. I love your eyes. Wow, that outfit looks really great. I would love to see you in a bathing suit. And that communication progresses, and before you know this little girl, because of her innocence and because she's being told all the things that we as fathers are supposed to tell our little girls, and so often absent. Now they are being preyed upon their vulnerabilities, and the next thing you know, that man is meeting that little girl somewhere. He's taking her to Walmart or to Target or whatever store. He's buying her a little pair of booty shorts and a halter top, and he's taking her to LA County or to a hotel in Orange County. If it's a hotel, he's placing an advertisement on a website with pictures of her, maybe obscuring her face because she looks too young, and she's putting what we call a menu on it. You've all been to a restaurant. On the menu, you have all the lists of the food items. On the right-hand side, you have all the prices. And in a person who's working as a prostitute, they list their menu, and those are all the sexual services that they provide. And on the right are all the prices. And this person takes this little girl, or worse yet, he takes her out to a street, a track. A track is a geographical location where prostitutes gather to solicit their services. And he puts her out on the street and he says, now this is what you're going to do. You're going to go out on the street and you're going to wave at the men passing by, and they're going to stop. And you're going to lean in their window, and whatever he tells you he wants to do with you, you're going to do it. Now that you have that picture, for some reason, when that little 11, 12, 15-year-old girl turns 18, we, law enforcement, society, we turn a blind eye and we say, she's an adult now. She's chosen to do that. She's not a victim. She never has been. Can I tell you that in my career in law enforcement, I've talked to over easily, I say this in a court of law because now it's just easier to remember, but I can tell you that the number is higher than this. I've spoken to over 500 girls working as prostitutes. Over 90% of them were all turned out, which is a term which means the first time that you are entering into prostitution, as minors. So why is it that as minors we look at them as victims, but when they turn 18 we don't? And we say they choose to do this. They want to do this. They're okay with this. They're not. They've been programmed. They've been taken advantage of. I gave you the example about elderly folks being vulnerable. We talked about children. The average age of a female entering into prostitution for the Department of Justice is 12 to 14 years of age. For those of you that are into statistics, this is your one and only slide that you'll be able to look at. Not really a big statistic person, but this is a good indicator of what's going on in the U.S. California is amongst the 4 states in the U.S. that are in the top 4, and I'm sorry to break the news to you, we're number 1. We continue to be number 1 in human trafficking. Human trafficking generates, in the U.S. alone, $32 billion a year. It's not going away. The only criminal enterprise that generates more revenue than human trafficking is what? Narcotics. 33 billion. 32 billion, 33 billion. It's not much of a difference. Our girls are being victimized. They're being targeted. So in the last few minutes that I have, I want to show you kind of the differences. A couple of highlights here. You see it's a $32 billion industry. And why do they come to Orange County? That's right, because we pay. Our sex purchasers are known for paying top dollar. Look, I don't want to be crude, but you're all smart people and you can do math. As a trafficker, when I put my girls out to work, I give them what's called a quota. A quota is a monetary amount that I placed on you by looking at you and deciding how much you are worth to me to sell you. Most girls' quotas are anywhere between $500 and $2,500 a day. If a blowjob and a hand job, which is the lowest amount that you're going to get paid, or the lowest sex acts, is $80, you do the math. How many of those do you have to do to accomplish your quota? And you do that 7 days a week. Girls that work as prostitutes don't get days off. They don't get holiday pay. They don't get vacation. For you ladies in there, you should be wondering, and you should ask the question, so what do they do when they're on their menstrual cycle? These little girls, when they're becoming young women. There's a solution for that. The traffickers will take makeup sponges, the little triangle white ones that many women use, and they'll insert those makeup sponges into our girls while they're menstruating, so that the sponges absorb the excess blood so they continue to work. That's why we have girls that show up at the ER with these sponges, and our ER doctors and nurses go, what is that about? That girl's being trafficked. She's a victim of trafficking because there are no days off. Ori will tell you she works when she's told to work. She eats when she is told to eat. She sleeps when she's told to sleep when she was being trafficked. She wears the clothes that her trafficker wants her to wear. Her life is controlled by this person who's exploiting her. In 2018, we had 50 million people come to Orange County. We are a destination city like no other. When I have the opportunity, Kim Wah is going to come up and speak in a second. I've testified before her. Don't get caught up in this, but I'm considered an expert in Orange County. I've testified in a court of law numerous times, and at some point she's going to ask me this question. And I love when they ask me this question and I have a jury, okay? And I'm shocked that I never get an objection. She'll say, Investigator Medina, can you please explain to the jury what a trafficker looks like? And I say, he looks like a child molester. And she'll say, how so? Can you explain it to the jury? Sure. Basically, in the methodology of a child molester, there's 3 phases that the child molester goes through. He targets his prey. He chooses someone who's vulnerable, okay? And then he begins a grooming process. And that grooming process, unfortunately, is a manner where he goes from picking his prey to now putting himself in a position of trust. Because his ultimate goal, which is the 3rd phase, is to exploit that child for his or her personal sexual gratification. Those are the 3 phases, okay? Then I say, and this is what a pimp looks like, or a trafficker. Trafficker picks a vulnerable target. If that little girl has had physical or sexual abuse, even better, because she's already preconditioned to this. Then he recruits her, which is very similar to grooming. It's just a different methodology. For the same purpose, which is to put himself in a position of trust so he can manipulate this little girl to do what he wants her to ultimately do, which is what? The final step is to exploit her. His goal is to possess her and control her and manipulate her to a point that she will do anything for him. And I'm going to explain that to you because if you're sitting in this audience and this doesn't make, you can't connect to this, I'm going to help you with my next slide, okay? Because then we move on to the next phase. But I want you to understand that in my mind, I worked sexual assaults for 2.5 years. In my mind, I have no problem getting up in a court of law and comparing the two and saying they're very similar and they're very alike. And the reason I do that is if I try to unpackage human trafficking and what a trafficker looks like for you, it's very difficult. But if I tell you he looks like a child molester, does that make sense to you? You can wrap your head around that because you know what a child molester is. So what is a victim of human trafficking? How does she present herself? When I get asked that question, this is what I tell the jury. I tell them, a victim of human trafficking presents herself like a victim of domestic violence. Again, hopefully none of you have been touched by domestic violence. I have in my family. But you may know someone. You may have been a victim. You may know someone. You may have a friend. You may have a girlfriend or someone who has been abused and it has been exploited in that way and severely abused. This is what I want you to think of in comparison. I can't tell you, I'm thinking of this girl one time when I worked patrol. I went out to this call and I get there and we're arresting her husband for domestic violence. He had beat her to hell. And I'm sitting with her at the table, her eyes swelling up. We got her a pack of ice, her eyes swelling up. She has a split lip. She's sobbing, her makeup's everywhere. And she's sitting at the kitchen table, and I asked her, why are you still with him? Let us help you. He's going to jail. You have the ability. We will help you. Is there a friend, a family? Is there somewhere you can go? You cannot continue to submit yourself to this kind of abuse. And the number one reason that she gives me for not leaving her husband after days, months, or years of abuse is what? I love him. I love him. And there's other reasons here. Our victims of human trafficking developed such a bond, Nicole touched on it, developed such a bond with their traffickers that many of them are in this toxic, unhealthy relationship where they're in love with their traffickers, and they unfortunately believe that their traffickers love them. That bond is powerful. That bond is extremely connected and hard to break. And just like Ori said, when she would walk into McDonald's and the mother pulled her child closer because she didn't want her to be within arm's distance of this girl, that's the same way that our girls feel about their trafficker. No one loves them. Where are they going to go to? They can't go back to their family. Law enforcement doesn't want them. Society doesn't want them. Ori tells a great story of where at some point when she was being trafficked at 11 or 12, she told her trafficker, I'm done, I'm over, pull over, I'm done. And the trafficker pulled over. Correct me if I tell the story wrong, okay? I've heard it so many times, but it's so powerful. Trafficker pulls over, opens the door, tells her, leave. I think it was more like, leave, bitch. And there this little girl goes, teenager, 12, 13 years of age. She says she walks down the street. She's in the middle of LA. She turns a corner, walks down the alley, and then she just stops dead in tracks. She turns around. She says, where am I going to go? Who's going to take me? So she turns around. She goes back. The trafficker's still sitting there with the door open. She gets in, slams the door, and he basically says, I don't want to have this conversation again. Okay, this is my last slide. I think I'm a couple minutes sober. I'm sorry. So what do we do now? I mean, I was hoping to come up here and there's nothing fun about this topic. I can't make it light or there's no levity to it. You should feel kind of like, boy, we're kind of ready for you to be done and move on and let's get on to some happy stories. But there are no happy stories. What can you do? I would suggest this. You need to, first and foremost, you need to take care of your family and your kids at home. What Nicole said, I portray myself on Instagram as an underage female. I get hit up by traffickers every week. I have 2 traffickers right now waiting to come pick me up. 2 years ago, I had a trafficker fly from Minnesota to come pick me up thinking I was a female because he was going to traffic me. All of this happens on Instagram. If you are not watching over your children's shoulder or monitoring their social media account, you don't want to meet me. You do not want to be calling the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force. You never want to meet me after tonight. If you are not monitoring them, you're fooling yourself. The next thing you could do is support your local law enforcement agency. You know, we kind of have a tough time these last couple years. Support isn't really at the forefront of what people think about us, but we're working hard for you. We really are. When Nicole mentioned that we got it right in Orange County, I'm sorry, but we do. You honestly should be proud of your Orange County agencies. We travel up and down the state because people want to learn from us, and it's not because we do anything special, it's because we're committed. And I'm a big believer in not reinventing the wheel. Support some of the non-governmental organizations or ask Nicole who you can support. You don't always have to go out and be the one on the front lines. Just pick a good place to support. And finally, I would really encourage you as I close to speak up. Unfortunately, there is some legislation coming down the line that is going to threaten. There's a lot of good-hearted people in California that think that prostitution should be legalized. I'm not here to talk about that, but I'm just telling you, if you're not educated, your voice isn't going to count. So I apologize for going over my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Happy. And keep in mind, Happy works in Orange County. So what he was talking about is happening right here in Orange County. So thank you very much for shining a light on that. Our next speaker is Kimberly Wah. Kim is one of 5 prosecutors in the Orange County District Attorney's Office Human Trafficking Unit. She has presented trainings with the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force in Merced and Kern counties. She has been a prosecutor for 11 years, including the Orange County District Attorney's Office, Sacramento County, and Butte County. She has prosecuted everything from misdemeanors to white-collar crimes to homicides and now to human trafficking cases. Please welcome Kim.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here to speak to you about this important topic. I did have the honor of having Investigator Medina. I call him Happy because we're on a first name basis, but I did have the honor of having him testify in one of my most recent hearings. It was a 3-day hearing where we did, it was a case, so I can't talk to you about the details of the case since it's still pending, but it involved educating 20 jurors who are community members just like you all about what human trafficking was. And I have to be honest, when I first joined the human trafficking unit, I didn't know what human trafficking was. I want to talk about that a little bit later as I go into my portion of the talk. But these jurors were just floored at what Investigator Medina, what Happy was telling them about what was happening in their own backyards. We don't think that it's an issue in our own communities. We don't think it's an issue that can happen in Laguna Niguel, in South County, but it does. So I want to talk a little bit about the Human Trafficking Unit at the Orange County District Attorney's Office. It was formed in 2012. We have 5 assigned prosecutors. I am one of them. We have 3 assigned investigators. We prosecute everything from human trafficking cases, pimping cases, pandering cases, and sexual assault cases that are related to trafficking. We handle the cases from filing, even sometimes pre-filing. We many times go out on calls, especially if the task force has a minor involved. We will be called out to the scene. We will direct some of the investigation. So sometimes pre-filing, then we file the complaint, and then we go ahead and we take it all the way to either plea or jury trial, so final disposition of the case. We work closely with the task force investigators. Nicole, as well as Ori, and I have gone up and down the state, like Happy just said, to train. So we work closely in terms of training other agencies. We work closely on cases. We work closely like in events like tonight, where we are educating the public, we're educating the community. And it is important, I want to note, it is really important for us to get out here and to educate the community, because you all are going to be our potential jurors in our trials. And if I didn't know what human trafficking was when I first started in the unit, I'm guessing most of our potential jurors don't know what it is. So human trafficking, and I do want to mention in South County, here in Laguna Niguel, we do work also with the Orange County Sheriff's Department Vice Unit that handles all the human trafficking and human trafficking related crimes as well. So what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is Penal Code Section 236.1. It's a relatively new law. It was enacted we're coming up on the 10th year anniversary of the law. And so when you compare that to some of the other laws on the books, pimping, pandering, murder, some of the sexual assault charges, those have been on the books for decades, for over 100 years sometimes. And our human trafficking statute is just coming on 10 years. And the reason why that is, it was passed in 2012 with Proposition 35. All of us California voters said we wanted harsher penalties for human trafficking violations and harsher fines. And why that is because, like Nicole said in her presentation, we're looking at these individuals, those who have been trafficked, as victims of crime. We're no longer, back in 2012, we're starting to look at them now as victims and not prostitutes, not criminals. There are still DA's offices across the country that do prosecute trafficked victims as criminals for prostitution. So we're starting to change that mindset, and it's still in the process. Not everyone knows about it, and not everyone is practicing it. So we want to really get out there and educate our community members. You have two different kinds of trafficking. You have labor trafficking and you also have sex trafficking. What we're here to talk about today, and 100% of our cases that we deal with in Orange County involve commercial sex trafficking. So that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. So I want to talk one thing about the misnomers. To explain what human trafficking is, sometimes we have to explain what it is not. So I know Nicole mentioned this and Happy mentioned this before. It's not smuggling. So one thing I think most people think about, most of our jurors think about, is human trafficking is smuggling a person or goods across borders. And that's not what trafficking is when we're looking at it in our own backyards in the domestic side. What we're looking at is, in the legal definition, is a deprivation of liberty that causes someone to sell themselves for sex or causes someone to traffic them in sex work. And that can be accomplished by fraud, deceit, coercion, violence, duress, menace, or threat. One of the common misconceptions, how many of you have seen the movie Taken? Very popular movie. One of the misconceptions is, and along with our jurors, our judges, they think that those are our cases. Someone is abducted off of the street, someone is chained up, someone's being forced to work after being shackled, for example. And those are, by and large, we do have a case that was recently prosecuted by my colleague that is being sentenced tomorrow. We do have one case like that, but by and large, that is not the majority of our cases. I want to talk about the majority of our cases that we see involving deprivation of liberty and give you an example so you can relate to it and you can understand how this is something that is very subtle. It's not something where you see a girl with multiple bruises on her face. So we see in our line of work what's called the boyfriend-pimp relationship. And that was mentioned by Happy briefly. And it involves a grooming process. It involves that trafficker looking for easy targets, looking for vulnerable victims like Nicole and Ori had mentioned online. And like I said, if you don't think it's happening in your own backyard, you're wrong. I say anywhere where there's internet, where there's people with money, and there are motels, you have trafficking going on. Nicole, Happy, and I, and Ori have recently traveled up to the Central Valley. We've trained in Merced County as well as Kern County, and we got some of the police agencies and the DAs saying, well, my boss says it doesn't happen here, and that's just wrong. And that's the Central Valley where, you know, they're not as affluent there. Orange County has all the money. It's happening there. We had one DA say, well, we have a large trucker population. We said it's happening. So this is something that happens. It's modern day slavery that happens in plain sight. And so, like I said, if you have the internet, you have to be very cognizant of what your children are doing, what they're on, what social media they're on. Things aren't the same as they were 20 years ago when we didn't have the internet. It's very easy for these traffickers to find the vulnerable victim. And it's almost like fishing for them. They throw out multiple lines and see which one is gonna bite. And that's exactly what Happy does on a daily basis with his undercover operations, posing as the 13-year-old girl. You know, these traffickers are looking for vulnerable victims so that they can exploit them. These relationships often start out as a regular boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. It can look like online dating. I met someone great online. This guy is telling me I'm beautiful. He courts me. He gives me gifts. He tells me I'm pretty. They start going out. It can look in the beginning like a real relationship to some people. And that's why I say it's hidden in plain sight. And this has been one of the most difficult and frustrating things that us as prosecutors have had to convince our judges, especially some of our judges who haven't been as educated in the victim-centered approach, is that eventually that relationship turns at some point where the boyfriend suggests that his girlfriend maybe go work in a strip club, or maybe earn some extra money on the side in prostitution. Eventually, it becomes more and more coercive, becomes more and more controlling. Those were the things I mentioned in terms of the deprivation of liberty. They're using duress, coercion, emotional manipulation. It's these subtle things that cause this deprivation of liberty. We're not seeing nowadays the trafficker who's beating girls and forcing them to work. And what we say is, and when we tell jurors, we say, if you look at a girl working who has a bunch of bruises on her face, and you see another girl who doesn't have a bunch of bruises on her face, which one are you likely to purchase that night? So traffickers are much more subtle about the kind of emotional control and manipulation they're going to exert over their victims now. They don't want to leave bruises on these girls. They want their girls to look good for the customer. And so what they do is they put them in a position of trust. They act as their protector. They tell the girls to call them daddy. And they end up controlling them in little ways. So what Happy was saying, just to dovetail with that, is they impose quotas on these girls. They say, you need to work, you need to earn $2,500 a night before you can stop working. You need to work 7 days a week. You need to work on your menstrual cycle with putting a sponge up you. They need to, typically when we see in the text messages between the two, between the trafficker and the victim, we'll see the young woman asking for permission to buy food, asking for food, saying they're hungry, asking for permission to go to the bathroom. These relationships can look to the untrained eye as a domestic violence relationship. And many times we do compare the trafficked victims to domestic violence victims because, like we said again, they keep going back to their trafficker. They keep going back to their abuser. And why is that again? It's because they believe that their trafficker loves them. And that's something that's really hard for us as individuals who maybe never experienced that before to understand. And that's hard for our jurors at trial to understand. I just want to touch, I think I'm running out of time. I just want to touch on the thinking, and I've gotten this question from law enforcement agencies and other DAs before. Aren't there prostitutes who go out there and want to work and say they're not being forced to work? We do get women that say that. That's correct. But by that time that Investigator Medina goes out that night and talks to them, they're 20 years old, they're 22, they're 25, and they've been working since they were 11, like Ori. They've been working since they were 13. The youngest victim I have on my case turned 13 the day before she was being put on the street and told to find a random guy to have sex with driving by. So what I want you all to think about is maybe your children, maybe when you were growing up, what did you dream to be? What did you want to be when you grew up? Doctor, lawyer. We're getting less lawyers now. People don't like us as much. But I want to be a vet. You never get anyone who says they want to work on the street and they want to have sex with 15 random strange men a night. That's not a thing. So 100% of these women who say that they're out there on the street working consensually and they're not being forced were first turned out when, on average, about 14 years old. And so that should be something that we think about as a community moving forward and what we can do to help. And so like everyone here on stage has said, we're part of the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force. We have many non-governmental organizations that help us. We had to get assistance to get a shelter for some of our individuals. Some of our religious organizations that we work with have assisted us with that. If you want to help, get in touch with us and let us know. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Kim, and thank you to all in your unit for what you do. And we are now to hear from our Capistrano Unified School District, Casey Kessler. Casey's passion for supporting individuals in a substantial way prompted her to earn her PPS credential, Master's in Counseling, and LPCC, Licensed Professional Clinical Counselor. For the past 7 years, she has been a school counselor at San Juan Hills High School. Casey helped create the district's suicide prevention and intervention protocol, presented at California Association of School Counselors Conference, supervised interns, and most importantly, has individually supported thousands of students experiencing struggles, including self-harm, suicidality, anxiety, depression, ADHD, grief, and a number of other challenges. Please welcome Casey.
Thank you guys so much for being here. I know it is late and we mostly are all working people that are probably getting exhausted, so I will keep it very short and sweet. I am a school counselor at San Juan Hills High School. Lisa Casarino is my counseling intern. She will be in the back for questions. She's been advising students in our district for 10 years and she helped with this presentation. So quickly, how do traffickers target their victims? We've heard a lot on that tonight, so we will breeze through that part. What's happening with our kids on social media, a look at prevention, serving students on a multi-tiered system of support at each grade level, and then finally some resources and supports on where do we go from here. I've heard some sickening information. I am definitely the newbie to the group, so I'm hoping that we can put some hope out there. So how do traffickers target kids? Definitely across social media platforms. They study victims' posts across all media outlets, look for vulnerable, gain their trust, pretend to understand them, and care about them. Vulnerable youth, kids who say things like this. Most kids probably have said something like this, right? And they're doing it on social media and getting targeted. So as school counselors, we are trained to be data driven. And so hearing that we were going to be presenting on this, we kind of wanted to hear from our kids. What's happening in South Orange County right now from our students, and let's really hear from them. So we created a video with our kids. In the interest of time, sadly, we are going to skip the video. However, I would really like to share one excerpt from it, just kind of out loud. One of our students who is wearing a Hume Lake sweatshirt, like Christian Camp, ASB kid, she'll share on the video. We're going to post the video for you all later. That she in particular got not a vulnerable kid per se, not really too many high risk factors, not in a family of domestic violence, just like a normal kid. She said that she actually shared, and I'll show you a story where someone posted on her account that she doesn't know, saying, I want you to be an ambassador for my brand. You are super cute. I want you to be a model. Can you share your address with me? Can you share more pictures with me? Can you take off some clothes and share pictures with me? Just randomly shared that to her. She said, I know better, but when I was 11, I wouldn't. My 11-year-old sister might be prey to this. She was a firecracker. She said, we need more information out to our students as school counselors. So we are going to team with our graphic arts department and our ASB kids to get some more just posters out to kids, just simple things like that. We did do the video, but we also did a school survey, and here's what we found. What's happening with our kids? We really wanted to know, so we asked them 2 weeks ago. 14% of students said they've been a victim of catfishing, so someone lying about who they are. 21% of students told us they met up with someone in person after they had only met up with them online. 56% of students told us that someone they don't know in real life has commented on their posts, which got us thinking, what are they commenting? Who are these strangers commenting on your posts? So we asked them. What was the most inappropriate thing that someone has posted on your account? Lots of dick pics, random things like that. Old man wanting me to send him pictures for money. The sugar daddy theme was like I would say maybe 20% of what we got. So I've had multiple sugar daddy, sugar mommy, and other figures contact me through DMs, chats on Instagram, Snapchat. Normally they start by calling me cute or telling me I'm pretty, and they offer me money for nude pictures. A student at my high school. So this was anonymous. We did put a lot of information on, like, please contact us if anything like that is happening. Themes, so will you model for our brand? You're gorgeous. I want to hire you. Things like that. Sugar daddy, Nicole talked about that a little bit, but just we looked it up on Urban Dictionary in case you don't know. According to Urban Dictionary, it's a rich, usually older man who offers up money or gifts to a less rich, usually younger person in return for companionship and sexual favors. 35% said they didn't know that the default setting on many of these social media applications is to share their location. So they sign up for it, they have no idea, and it's tracking where they are all the time. One girl pulled up her phone. I've actually been off social media for a little bit, but one girl pulled up her phone and showed me San Juan Hills High School where we were. All the kids are there, and she thinks it's only her friends that can see. She's like, my location's off. I'm like, good job. So 24.2% said they never even thought about the location, about the settings, about things when they sign up for this. So TikTok was fined $5.7 million by the Federal Trade Commission for violating U.S. children privacy laws. Since then, they have tried to get better, so making improvements. And one of the things they did was say, oh, we are really tightening up our restrictions on kids 13 to 15 on what they can share. But most children, most teenagers will say, I'm 16 when they're 12. So we need to keep an eye out for that and be watching and really enforcing those age restrictions. Prevention. So really what we've heard tonight is very much in line with what our research kind of showed. That three-prong approach to really helping the well-being of the whole child and supporting the whole child from the beginning is key. So yes, social media, monitoring social media, super important. There's practical tips I created. I hope you guys pick up a handout on your way out. But really we want to support the whole child. And school counselors are doing this. We definitely can be doing more, so we want to keep looking into that. But we do support the whole child social, emotionally, academically, and with career readiness. We try our best to equip students to manage their emotions, handle the pressures of life, and feel more comfortable. We do this on an MTSS or multi-tiered system of support for kids. And so basically that green tier is what students all get. So for example, the poster that we want to create with our graphic arts students and ASB kids, that poster would be for all kids about social media safety, right? Classroom lessons, all students would get that. The tier 2 are more at-risk students. So who are getting those support are the more at-risk kids, maybe kids that have been abused, domestic violence victims. We want to help them as well. And then tier 3 might even be like intervention and postvention. So some of the things that these amazing people are doing. So prevention, some of the classroom guidance lessons that we're doing in schools right now, social media safety, signs of suicide, stress, anxiety prevention. So again, not just targeted at social media, but really the whole child. So looking at these 3 aspects and really trying to build their confidence. Where are you going in the future? What do you want to do for college? We want to really give them confidence and empower them. Research shows there are higher risk populations. Some of them are on the board. So not just school counselors, but we have our school resource officers on the lookout and helping with students. Our bilingual community liaison helps a lot with homeless students and other at-risk populations. We definitely work directly with social workers. We're trying to improve graduation rates of foster youth right now with a couple of our kids and really support them and come around them with family team meetings and get them graduated. We have super strict policy in our district about like suicidal ideation, physical abuse. We're definitely mandated reporters and we're always on the lookout for that. We go out and train teachers on when to report. We kind of walk a lot of our teachers through their first CPS calls oftentimes. So resources. So we have been fortunate enough to start a family resource center in our district. There are a ton of great resources on there, and I wanted to point out a couple. If you're a family member or just community member that wants more information and resources, you can look by age. So if you have a 5th grader at home or if you have a junior, there are resources that you can look at for that. There's also resources by topic. The very bottom one is social media and safety. That is where my presentation is going to be posted tonight. The video of the kids speaking that we made will be posted there. The practical tips that we created for you all for social media safety and how to talk to your kids about it is also going to be posted there. In 2021, so earlier this year, in January, CUSD counselors created a parent webinar on social media safety that will also be posted on the Family Resource Center website. Please take my handout on practical tips for helping your kids with social media. It has some good stuff on there. And then we also wanted to let you know that we did begin the digital citizenship and cyber safety curriculum. Every single grade level in our district is getting 3 or more lessons. And so you can see here, kindergarten is getting these 3 lessons. Every single kindergartner in our district will get this. And all the way up through 12th grade. So we are trying to teach kids about this stuff. You are not alone as parents. Schools are trying as well. Futurology is just one really amazing resource I wanted to plug about college and career. Again, if kids are confident, they know where they're going after high school, we're instilling those values and dream big and you can go to college. That is going to be super helpful for decreasing victimization as well. In closing, definitely take some practical tips. Thank you all so much for your time. I tried to go quick. I know it's late.
Well, Casey, you are a very fast talker, but you had lots of great information, and be sure to stop at the district resource table before this evening is over. So I'd like to introduce our district attorney, Todd Spitzer. Tonight is very significant for him because human trafficking is a very important issue for District Attorney Spitzer and his office. For over 30 years, he has been a champion for public safety and has dedicated his life to keeping families safe, has dedicated his career to public service as an Orange County supervisor, former California State Assembly member, and now serves as the elected Orange County District Attorney. His reputation as an
That's enough. That's enough, Wayne.
Okay. Well, we are so glad you're here.
Thank you.
And I will turn it over to you.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to do questions, but we're going to do a 7.5 inning stretch. So get up and stretch because you need a little bit of, I know you need to move around, okay? Please. Now we could do like down dog and we could do like different yoga positions if you like. All right, shake it a little bit. All right, great. Have a seat. So would you give this panel a big round of applause? They're pretty amazing people. So let me tell you how I feel. My wife and I, we have 2 kids. Our son Justin's 23 now, and he's getting married in April. I'm not too worried about him. Our daughter's 15. After hearing this presentation tonight, I kind of feel like the parents, when the Beatles came to America, that society was over, right? Right? The Rolling Stones and the Beatles, and society was over. And I hear this presentation, I want you to understand a couple things. When that legislation passed, Prop 35, that was an initiative. The California legislature, when I was there for 6 years, refused to pass enhancements to knock down human trafficking. And I'm glad our Assemblywoman's here tonight because she has to work in that cesspool I call Sacramento. And what I want you to know is we're not going to allow Sacramento to change our quality of life here in Orange County. We're always going to fight to protect our community. And it's no accident that this panel goes all throughout California and does training for other jurisdictions. My other elected DAs have asked for this training in their jurisdictions because they know this is a problem. Now, the investigator used some expressions tonight. I'm not sure some of you were coming here to listen to hear. I mean, you know, and I have to tell you something funny, because I was a police officer for 10 years, and when I was in the police academy during one of our first aid presentations, I ended up passing out. And they pulled me up after our training and they said, "Are you sure you could be a police officer? Because, you know, you actually have to go to crime scenes and see this kind of stuff." And so I came back to the DA's office, because I was in the police academy to become a reserve Los Angeles police officer. And I was in juvie at the time, and I would look at autopsy photos and gang shooting photos, and I did that to desensitize myself so I could do the work that I wanted to do. And what I want to tell all of you is that when you listen to the kinds of issues that are being expressed here tonight, I know as parents, if you're talking to your kids like I talk to my daughter, I can tell you exactly what your kids say. "Oh, Dad, you don't need to talk to me about that. That's so embarrassing." You know, and they just want to leave the room. Although, as my daughter leaves the room, she's got that big fat cell phone sticking out of her back pocket, right? Which is exactly her window to the entire world. And that cell phone and this internet is destroying everything we know about our values and our morals. And it's up to us as parents and community members to protect our children and protect our community, because no one's going to do it for us. And that's what's so amazing about this county, in contrast to what's happening in San Francisco and Los Angeles. All right? So these crimes that Kimberly talked about, they have sentencing enhancements. So we had a case here in Orange County where they do these surreptitious phone calls, that means, or internet, where they pretend to be a minor. But they're law enforcement. You've seen it on TV, right? To Catch a Predator, and the guy shows up for sex and he gets busted, right? Not until the commentator comes out and asks him questions, right? And so when they do that, we had a case where that was happening, and it went to the Court of Appeal here in Santa Ana, and they said, no, that was an undercover police officer, so that is not a completed crime, because the minor element was an undercover police officer, not a real minor. So that went to the Court of Appeal, and they overturned the conviction in this case called Moses. So I wrote a letter to the California Supreme Court. This was a conviction we achieved in 2016. And in 2020, I wrote our California Supreme Court, and I said, you need to read Proposition 35. The voters of the state of California wanted tougher sentences. They wanted human traffickers held accountable, and they wanted us to go for maximum punishments. When we get our convictions, and we have a 95% conviction rate, these traffickers, I'm talking about the pimps, they are going away for decades. We are locking them up forever. I am so proud of the fact we're taking them off the streets, and we're actually breaking the shackles that these women have had to live under. And I'll just close with this. It's phenomenal. So the Supreme Court took the case, and they voted unanimously to overturn our 4th District Court of Appeal, and we got a 12-year sentence on that case, and that's now the law in our district, so they can do their surreptitious undercover activities, and we can still get the full force of the statute. Thank you. So I started the DA's office in 1990, 32 years ago, and the cage in the court, the cage, right? The lockup, was full of prostitutes. Because I worked in North Court at the time, in Anaheim, arrested a lot of prostitutes on Harbor Boulevard, right? Because you have the conventions, and you have Disneyland, and Knott's Berry Farm, and you have all these millions of people that come into our county every single week. And we don't do that anymore. We don't prosecute the prostitutes in Orange County because we're more sophisticated about where this really is. It's with the people who are trafficking these women. exploiting these women. It happens to boys too. Don't think it doesn't happen to boys. Boys get trafficked too. Not with the same frequency, but we still are very aggressive about protecting young boys. So I just want you to know that in our county, we are enlightened, but we are aggressive, and we don't want to go after the women who are in this life. We want to go after the people who are controlling their minds and their bodies. So I'll just say as your DA, one, thank you so much for your support for the great work they're doing. Because there are places in America today that want to defund the police. There are places in America that want to shut down law enforcement. And let me just tell you something that gets me every time. If you defunded human trafficking, who is the one that gets exploited if you take away the resources to go after the traffickers? It's these young women at 11 years old that find themselves in this lifestyle, right? That is exploitive. Defunding law enforcement and taking the resources away to free these women from their shackles is actually sexism and exploitism in and of itself. And I'm not going to allow that to happen in our county. So thank you so much, and God bless you all.
Well, thank you, District Attorney Spitzer, and let's have a round of applause for the District Attorney and his entire team of Deputy District Attorneys. They do phenomenal work to keep our county safe. As a city council member, as my council colleagues, and as other electeds see, we often compare Orange County to other counties throughout the state. And we really have a district attorney and his entire office that is focused on the safety of our community. So that is much appreciated. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your whole team, and keep up the good work. Okay, so if I'm chattering, it is freezing here. And I don't know about you, but I'm just really glad the air conditioning's working in this new building, huh? But I will try not to chatter. So we have some questions. And let me see, some of them may have been answered already, or some of them we can consolidate. Okay, at what age, and this is, do we have the microphones for the panelists? Okay, thank you. And I will let you decide amongst yourself who's going to answer. At what age should parents begin to educate their children on human trafficking? And how do you articulate this without scaring them too much?
I would just, you can use your best judgment, but I have 8 and 9-year-old nieces that I just had a conversation with. And we didn't go into too much detail about these different websites, but Instagram, and I don't want to give it too much credit, has a website called OnlyFans. And that's where sex is being sold over Instagram. And my 8-year-old niece know what OnlyFans is. And I'm going to tell you something. You're not just up against traffickers. You're up against media that's defining what young girls and what women should be doing in order to be women. You're up against not social media. You're also up against music and what's defining of how you should be in a relationship. So I would say as young as probably like 8, I would say 7, when you start to talk about, you use the language, I'm pretty sure. You just use different language. When they're younger, you talk about healthy boundaries, you talk about red flags, you talk about unsafe people. But my 8-year-old and 9-year-old niece, who has not been that exposed to stuff like that, already knew what OnlyFans was at 8 and 9 because of the conversations and the things they've seen on TikTok. So we start talking about internet safety. We start talking about stranger danger. But I'm going to be brutally honest. My daughter's almost 3. Because of the things that her mother experienced, we will already be having those type of conversations. I'm not going to sugarcoat nothing with my child. I wouldn't sugarcoat anything else. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. So I think you can choose your parenting or whatever type of parent you are. But I'm an open parent. I'm also an open auntie, about with my girls and especially with my family. So they know all about trafficking. They also know because the world is not going to give it to them sugar-coated. They're going to use the language. They're going to use the vulgar language. So those are the conversations that we have. And making sure that you have a safety plan. And to be honest, parents, although I'm a mother, I wish that I would be my daughter's best friend. But I'm probably not. So I hope that you have that safe person for your child to do that with.
Thank you, Ori. Are there programs to reach high schoolers in Orange County to educate children or high school students of the dangers and realities of human trafficking?
There's definitely room for improvement, and I'm learning a lot tonight. But yes, we have, as a district, teamed with Common Sense Media. And so, as I talked about in my presentation, we're already getting classroom lessons out, 3 per grade level on just social media safety. In addition, our school counselors are in classrooms talking about that to kids. So.
And one last thing, Vanguard University has a group of students, they're college students that come out to the high schools and really do a huge thing that they do for the high school students in auditorium status when like COVID and all that stuff is over. And they come out and actually talk to the youth and actually give them awareness and things like that. And it gives them a balance of someone being in their age group and age bracket versus like, oh, me now coming in, no offense, but for them, I'm kind of getting a little bit older for them in order to talk to them. But there's also other survivors and organizations that actually have those different type of curriculums and actually do that work. So your districts and your schools have to find it, because I'm not sure if anyone was going to talk about it, but there is actually a law in place. I know for a fact that high schools and your school districts are supposed to be briefly talking about human trafficking.
And so I want to add to that. The law says 1 time in junior high, 1 time in high school. That is what the law says, which is clearly not enough. Clearly not enough. So you definitely want to make sure that this type of prevention is occurring throughout every year that they are in school. Just like she was saying, so glad to hear that you guys have that. That's awesome. A lot of schools don't. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Next question. Is massage parlor prostitution a form of trafficking?
Yes, it is. The problem, I don't care what city you live in, what county, you have, if you have a massage parlor, and this I tell people, if you want to know if a massage parlor is a brothel, it's very simple. First, it's all tinted, okay? Second, it has a neon sign. And if you have men walking out of there with a smile on their face, you have a brothel, okay? The California Association for the Massage Therapists say that 85% of legitimate massages, 85% of the people that go for legitimate massage are women. So I always tell women, do not buy your husband a gift certificate for that massage parlor, because it's not going to be good. Every single county, every single city has them. Okay, everybody has them. We have so many. The short answer is yes, they're brothels, and there are victims of human trafficking there. The problem is they will never disclose. We have tried very difficult. We had one in San Juan Capistrano, right next to the Catholic school, not J Sierra, another one. And we went in and we took that brothel over. We contacted 6 or 8 girls, and none of them would tell us, would give us enough information that we could go after anyone for human trafficking. Otherwise, I promise you we would. It's just a very difficult, it's a different type of commercial sex act that's occurring. I say that in the way it's organized, it's better organized, but it still is human trafficking.
Do you offer any internships for students completing their undergraduate degree? So it sounds more like a Nicole question.
Yeah, with Child Welfare, Child Protective Services, we have internships. It's for master's level interns who are receiving their master's in social work. So we do have internships. There are nonprofit organizations throughout the county, though, that do also have interns for bachelor level people who are working on their bachelor's. So they're throughout, yes.
Where in Orange County should you have your teens stay away from? That's kind of
The internet, yeah.
yeah, the internet, no matter where they are. Yeah. Okay. Are there Christian organizations that visit the streets where these girls work and reach out to them with counseling?
So I was on a local, really quickly, I was at a local track where girls are being sold and stuff. And I literally can count probably about 76 of them. 4 were minors, 14, 16, 13, who was 2 of them were actually my previous clients that I worked with. And the other one was 17 years old. 76 girls out there. And the one comment that someone made about the Christian organizations, like, yeah, they come out for one night, then they're gone. That's it. They come, give you prayer, but yeah, it's cool, but then they're gone. It's consistency for the women that are out there and for the youth that are out there. You know, it's a consistency for me. And when you're talking about God, I'm going to be brutally honest. For 4.5 years and the way that you're being treated out there, you don't think it's a God the way that you're surviving. So what shows up is your consistency and your support. That's how you introduce God to somebody. It's the love and the consistency that you give them so that they can see God through you first, right? So that's what I would say. Be careful of those things, but there are organizations that actually are nonprofit organizations that are actually Christian based, you know, and are actually led by survivors. You can find them on the internet. And I know a lot of women that go out there and do prayer, like they're prayer warriors and stuff, but it's consistency. You know, my mom's 55. My mother was a trafficking victim at the age of 9, you know, and she's 55 realizing that she was a victim. And when she goes out there and she talks to these women, she can gravitate to them, she can talk to them. So I would just say if you're going to do it, don't do a one-time thing trying to give them a goodie bag full of condoms and chapstick and stuff. You know, they get enough of that stuff. So, sorry.
Thank you, Ori. That we have time for tonight. It's regarding SB 357, legalizing prostitution. If SB 357 were to be passed, how would that affect the work that each of you do?
I would most likely be out of a job, but that's not what I'm concerned about. And I'll answer this in 2 minutes. I'm very passionate about this. When I went back and I talked to you earlier about child molestation and how people target child molesters, right? Those kids are being exploited. We would never legalize child molestation, or I hope we wouldn't. So why in the world would we legalize something that over 90% of our girls entering into prostitution are minors, and they're programmed that they're conditioned that way, so that becomes part of their normal that Ori talks about. Why on earth would we condone that and legalize that? Because in my mind, and I'm not the smartest person here, I give you that, but in my mind, all we're doing is condoning the manipulation and the exploitation of our young girls. Okay, we're looking at them as adults. And a lot of these people that are thinking that they're doing the right thing, they're missing the fact that the majority, overwhelmingly the majority of these girls were preconditioned at an early age so that by the time they turn 18, they know no other life. There is no other way out. So I think we do our girls a huge disservice. It would be, to me, it would be like saying, well, let's just let child molesters go and exploit our girls. What is the difference? I'm missing it. Someone could explain it to me afterwards because I'm still not getting it. Young girls are our most precious commodity, and how would we agree when Ori sees those juveniles out on the street? When we get a report of a juvenile that's being trafficked, our record is 26 hours it took us to find the girl. We will not stop. We will not stop until we find that girl, because I can't sleep at night knowing that there's a 13-year-old girl out there that's being raped 10 or 12 times a day. And she becomes an adult, and now it's okay. I don't understand it. I trust that our DA and our legislation, at least down in Orange County, will support us on that. I'm not worried about being out of job. I'm worried about our girls being victimized, and you should be too.
Thank you, Heather. It's
Really quickly. You know, I'm in a world full of probably like over 178 survivors who all have their different experiences and stuff. And I'm really passionate about that legislation because I'm up against, I feel like for sometimes, truth be honest, I'm devil's advocate. You know, Happy tells a funny story about me and just the things that I've realized. But that's my one fear of thinking about my 2-year-old daughter, thinking that it's a job, that's something that she can do. And I'm telling you guys, a lot of community members, and it's the reason why I live in Orange County and would never go back to LA County. But you're up against you're up against a lot of people that are pushing for that legislation. A lot. And it sickens me and hurts my heart that there are even people who've experienced this who are going up with that legislation and wanting it to be approved. So please, in whatever you can do, whatever you need to do, whatever legislative like officials you need to talk to, I could be in a room full of 1 against 50 other survivors, and I'm not I'm not okay with that. I'm not. I'm not okay with someone, our society, saying that it's okay. Because I can give you an honest, truthfully, and that's a whole nother topic. The many women that I've met and the young girls that I've met, my sisters, we call each other sisters, all came in encounter with law enforcement or some type of child welfare program. And that's how we got out. So it's not just sometimes like by faith and, like not by faith, but an organization and not having legislation. We laughed about 20 of us went on a retreat the other day, and we laughed about the fact like, you know what, it really pretty wasn't too bad up in child welfare. It was safer than where we was at, And I just say that because we had to come in contact with law enforcement, and we had to come in contact with some type of law enforcement in order to get restoration and stuff. So please, whatever you can do, do not, and be careful when you're voting. Please be careful about that stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim?
Can I just add? So, implications of that bill or the potential law that passes is, in addition, it would just just effectively put our investigations at zero. We would not be able to investigate our cases. We would not be able to do the operations that we do. The fact is that this is not a self-reported crime. We don't have victims coming out of the woodwork to report that they're victims of crime. These victims are found by the good men and women in law enforcement who do these operations to locate these victims. If prostitution is not a crime, we do not, under the law, have a reason to detain them. We do not, under the law, have a reason to reach out to them, to get them services, to look through their phones to see if they are being trafficked. And when you meet them on the street, they will tell you they're not being trafficked and they're not a victim of crime. So that is the fact. That is, how many investigations do we have a year? It'll go to zero.
So you've heard the passion, you've heard the commitment of the members of the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force, as well as our CUSD school counselor. These people are committed to keeping our community and our children safe. So what I ask you is, what is your call to action? I know that you've been moved by what you've heard tonight, so what are you going to do to change it? You can be the one to make a difference in someone's life. You can also be the one to make the difference in lives of many. It's all up to you, and it begins by committing to your call of action. If you haven't written it down yet in your notes, and remember your notes in the middle of your program, I ask you to reflect and make a commitment to self that by this weekend you will have identified what you will do. Is it raising awareness? So either the signs are recognized and a phone call is made to the hotline, or the customers are shamed, so the demand is cut. Is it raising funds for residential programs for survivors? Is it supporting at-risk youth who have aged out of foster care to reduce their vulnerability of being targeted? Is it being a youth leader and starting the conversation with our children and teens about human trafficking and about social media? Is it teaching and implementing safe social media practices in the home? Or is it to advocate for legislation? The choice is yours. You have the freedom to choose, a freedom that trafficked victims do not have. I know that many of you would like to continue this community conversation, and if so, put my name at the top of your yellow question card and indicate your area of interest so that we can follow up with you with some smaller group settings as far as providing information. And then you can give the card to one of the Laguna Niguel Women's Club volunteers at the end of the program. There are many, many organizations to help you with your call to action. So please connect with those that are recognized by the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force.